Hi everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. In today's MTPredictor video, I'd like to look at when it's acceptable to try and top and bottom pick. Most trading educators say that trying to top or bottom pick is financial suicide and extremely dangerous, and I'd agree with that most of the time. However, there are times, for example, we had a DP sell here in a 3-minute chart of the DAX. You can see that caught that high really nicely just before a sharp fall. So were there any other reasons why you might consider taking what would otherwise be a trade that's against a very well established uptrend? Well, the first thing is pattern. If I right mouse click and do Elliott wave intermediate over the high, you can see the rally up into that high was actually a 5-wave sequence. But it wasn't just any old 5-wave sequence, it was a 5-wave sequence where the high was at our minimum wave 5 WPT. If I zoom this out a bit, you can see there it is, our minimum wave 5 WPT. In other words, this is an area where this wave 5 sequence is likely to end. Also, if I look at our STF indicator, there's actually divergence on that, so normal oscillator divergence is also a good thing to consider as well. But the main thing for me is the higher time frame. I've been looking at this a lot in recent videos, so let's just clear this off. Let's go out to the 15-minute chart and have a look at the pattern. Whoops, I'll just clear it off because that was my analysis from earlier. Let's have a look at the pattern going up into this high here. Again, right mouse click, Elliott wave intermediate. Can you see how this was a 5-wave sequence also? Not a very nice 5-wave sequence. Normally we like to see the wave 3, the strongest and longest in a completed 5-wave sequence, but technically it shouldn't be the shortest, and it wasn't in this case. But the point being is that on this 15-minute chart, at the high here, we're also at the minimum wave 5 WPT. So on a higher time frame chart, we were at an area where a wave 5 was likely to end. On the 3-minute chart, we were also at an area of where a wave 5 was likely to end, our minimum wave 5 WPT, and we also had our automatic DP sell setup unfold. So therefore, if you're a more experienced user, and I'd really only suggest this if you are quite experienced trader, you could look to sell this, and as you can see, the DAX then came down here straight into what would have been the first target, which would be the DP of the minor wave 4 for a nice 2.1 hour profit. If you're more experienced, again, let's take this off and go out to the 15-minute chart. Again, if you're more experienced, on a higher time frame here, the likely support area again is the DP from the prior wave 4. This would be on the chart in advance. So you'd have right mouse click, place the DP on, and there's that support level on the chart there in advance. So that would be your higher time frame support. So if you're on your short-term chart and you've done your analysis here, the more experienced user may well have said, well, as the market is collapsing so quickly here, it's likely to go a little bit further. Where's the area, or the most logical area of where the next level of support will come in? Well, it's the higher time frame support zone. So if we drag our risk reward down to this level, you can see that means a profit of a potentially 7R, a very nice trade indeed. So that's a good example there of how the more experienced users or the MTPredictor customers can look to take a trend or take a trend reversal trade, in other words picking a top or a bottom, in this case a top, when there are other reasons why the market might reverse to that area. For standard users, you'd have gone with the STF indicator color here. There was actually a TS2 buy setup here, so you'd have actually taken this particular trade on the long side and you'd have come out at the target there because the STF was weak, in other words less than our grey line, so that would have actually had a nice 2.3R profit. So if you're a standard trader, you'd have actually had a nice little long trade up into the high. But if you're more experienced, as I've already shown, we're at 15-minute wave 5 WPT resistance. We also had a 5-wave sequence which was also at wave 5 WPT resistance. The logical initial target was the DP from the wave 4. More experienced users would have gone through that because the market was collapsing so strongly and would have actually gone out to the 15-minute chart just as I've shown you and placed the DP on from that wave 4, and that would have been your logical area of where you'd expect the market to go to. And as I've already shown, that would increase the profit there to a nice 7.4 7.3, 7.4 hour profit. So hopefully this has been a good example of how to use the more advanced tools in the MTPredictor software program to help you pick top and bottoms, but again only when there are other reasons why you think a top or bottom will come in this case pattern, and also then pattern and resistance on the higher time frame chart as well. Remember, we always use our correct position sizing to keep our initial risk small under control, so if this has gone wrong it still would have only been a 1 hour loss, and as you can see, as it went right, that would have been a nice 7.3 hour profit. In other words, we're looking for trades where the profit is much larger than the initial risks. So trying to pick top and bottoms is not necessarily more dangerous. You just have to be careful when you do it, and as I've said, when you do it, if you're more experienced, is when you have other reasons why you think a top or bottom is coming in, and that is normally support or resistance on a higher time frame chart. So hopefully this has been a good example to show them what the more experienced users can do with the MTPredictor software program.